we have got a table here that, we need to kind of look at it and figure out exactly what it's telling us. But basically, this company has two components to the price that it charges. Each shipping rate consists of a fee per box and a price per pound. So this particular customer has one box that weighs 15 pounds. Now, first of all, we start here, weight of the box, and we can find out which one of these rows we're dealing with. So 10 to 25, it's a 15-pound box. So we're looking at these values. All right, so and remember, it's a fee plus a price per pound. So we have to pay that fee, that's $10, plus a price per pound. It's 65 cents per pound. That's gonna be 0.65 times, how many pounds are we looking at? 15 pounds. So if I do that, that's 10 plus, you multiply 0.65 times 15 and you get 975. When you add that together, you get 1975. The answer is C or H, whatever you think. So it's one of these problems that, the calculations, notice with a lot of these problems, the calculations themselves are not that complex. The complexity comes from having to read the diagram, read the table, read all the words, and understand exactly what they're asking you to calculate. So that's where that can get a bit more complex. But hopefully, if you did make a mistake, you can catch where that mistake was made. So today we're going to be looking at more practice with the side splitter theorem. I'm just going to go through two problems, and that's about it as far as the lesson goes. Your homework is going to be a continuation of the PDF that we're going to be looking at, and that's on Canvas. So we can find, you'll be able to find that under today's date. All right, so this worksheet right here is the PDF for your homework. You're going to do all the even problems. So all of them except for problem 16. If you look at problem 16, if we just compare these two right here, notice that this is a side splitter scenario for 14 because we got all these parallel lines cutting through. But this one, we don't have any parallel lines. This is what we call the angle bisector theorem. And it's very similar, but we're not really learning about it. It's a less important concept, though it is important to learn it in its own way, but we're just gonna have to focus on the side splitter theorem. So skip number 16, and that's written in the instructions for your homework tonight. And now we can look at just two problems, number 9 and 11. So let me just run through this real quick. The idea behind this, just to reiterate what we talked about yesterday, is that we want to find a pattern of correspondence. And what that means is if I look at the parallel lines and what they are cutting through, then I can find that this segment right here corresponds to this segment because the same parallel lines are cutting through both of those segments right there, if that makes sense. Now, this segment right here corresponds to this one. And it has to be those two corresponding because it's the same parallel lines. Now, if I look at this and this line right here, those parallel lines, then this segment corresponds to this one. And maybe this can be our starting point because we're always going to set this up with a proportion. So I can just start off that way. And I can just figure out what goes in the numerator, denominator on each side. So notice that if I compare this segment right here to this one, I'm not talking about the small segment, I'm talking about the entire length from the first parallel line to the third one, then I know both of those numbers. I know that this segment is 22 in length and this one is 11, and they correspond to each other. So this is good. I've got two numbers that correspond. So I can put these in some kind of order. I'm going to put it as 22 over 11 equals something over something, because I've got correspondence. There's nothing wrong with anything right there. Now what I'm missing is this value right here. That's the unknown value, but it doesn't quite correspond to anything, which it would be this segment right here that I'm sketching in. So let me kind of erase all this and we can focus on this. So these two segments correspond. Now, I don't know the length of the unknown number, but that's what I'm solving for, but I can figure out what this length is. How do I find that missing value? Are there any thoughts on what we can do to solve for that? No one has any thoughts? Would it be 6? Yes, it would be 6. How do we know it's 6? And you can put it in the chat if you want, or you can say it out loud. All right. So hope you guys are just, okay, the total is 11. And we know that, there we go. Okay, I'm getting it now. So we have these segments. We know that from here to here, that entire length is 11. And then this segment right here is 5, which means this has to be the difference. 11 minus 5 makes that 6. So I'll just erase all this real quick. And this has to be 6 in length. And we can see the 6 plus the 5 makes the 11. All right. So you've got to be able to look at the diagram and come up with some missing values. This is kind of a preliminary calculation. We still need to kind of consider what I did before was I did 22 over 11 because those segments correspond to each other. So now I can do these corresponding parts. This value, this segment over this segment right here, that'd be x over 6. So 22 over 11 equals x over 6. And at that point, it's just a pretty straightforward proportion. We go through and solve it. We can do that. So if I multiply this out, I get, let's see, what do we get? Well, 22 times 6 equals 11x. 22 times 6, you can just plug that into your calculator. That's 132. Divide both sides by 11. And those cancel out. X equals 12. Now we can think about it this way. If we go from this side right here, let me just put the 6 back here. So the 11 was doubled when I came over here. It became doubled to 22. So the 6 gets doubled to 12 right here. They have the same, what we would call scale factor. So they both grow by the same factor. All right, so if we doubled 11, that means we need to double 6. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If you need to come back to this, if you didn't catch part of that, let me know. But we're gonna look at one more problem and then that will be it for today because it's not new information. We're just looking at more problems that use side splitter. And this is one of all the problems on the worksheet. This is probably the hardest one for students to wrap their heads around, just because I've given this worksheet in the past And I know that I get so many questions about this problem right here, but I would encourage you, if you run into a problem where you're like, I don't see a path forward, you need to shift your perspective. And what I mean by that is, and I'll just run through this problem. We'll make it a little bit faster. I can look and see, what do I already know that corresponds? And what already corresponds, if I look at the numbers that are given, I've got the 7 plus 14x and the 35. Notice those are using the same parallel lines. These correspond to each other. So it's the entire length here and the entire length down here. So those correspond. So I'm going to put those into a ratio with each other. There's a pattern of correspondence. So I'm going to go left over right. It's going to be 7 plus 14x over 35. Left over right. And that part, you might be good with that. But now we need to see what else corresponds in this diagram. And what else corresponds? Well, I've got this segment corresponds with this one. And I don't know one of the numbers. I've got this segment corresponds with this one. And I don't know one of the numbers there. So if I'm trying to figure out which one, I need to know one of those numbers. And I don't know it right now. So I can look at this and I can figure out this one, this length right here is going to be very hard to figure out. Not very hard, we can do it, but it's just going to be challenging because I don't even know what that length is. That's what I'm solving for. So maybe I just ignore this one. What about this one right here? If I know this is 35, the entire length, and that's 25, this is just like the one before. 35 minus 25 means that this length right down here, that one right there, has to be 35 minus 25, which is 10. And I'm going to pause right there and see if there are any questions. I might have gone through that pretty quickly. So do you guys understand where I got that 10 from? Okay. Let's see, I saw some thumbs up. Okay, we got that. So at this point, I've now got another two things that correspond. I'm going to go ahead and erase all this stuff right here because let me not even worry about those segments. I don't need to worry about that 25 or this missing value down here because I've got other segments that correspond. So I did left over right, the 7x plus 14 over 35. I already have that in my proportion. So let me do left over right again. It's going to be 22 over 10. And now I found this 10, which is the corresponding length. That's the key idea. So at this point, now that we've got two corresponding parts and I've created my proportion, I can do my cross products, and I'll do this pretty quickly. I've got 10 times 7 plus 14x equals 35 times 22. If I multiply this out, I'll go ahead and do the distributive property over here. That's going to be 70 plus 140x. 35 times 22, we can just plug that in. And that's 770. Now I can subtract 70 from both sides. So I get 140x equals 700. Now I can divide both sides by 140. And 700 divided by 140 is 5. So x equals 5. And that's it. That's all there is to it. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but what I am saying is that we can find corresponding parts, set up a proportion, and just go through the equation. If you need more help with this, please stick around. Let me know if you have questions on grades, the end of the wrapping up of this unit, anything that we talked about in class today. If you have any questions, please feel free to stick around. Otherwise, you have a wonderful day. You have your homework on Canvas, and please make sure you're getting started with that.